Welcome back. It's time for Lefties Losing It. Here is a lefty well and truly losing it, claiming that telling him you're voting for Donald Trump is among the most dehumanising things you can do. The narcissism, the entitlement here is off the charts.
Oh, I'm not transphobic, but what exactly? You're about to tell me the most dehumanizing thing I've ever heard you believe about trans people? You're about to tell me you're voting for Trump? You're about to tell me that you don't think trans women should use the women's bathroom? If you need to put a disclaimer and that but, maybe keep that thought to yourself. Maybe let's try and think of another thought.
Fake nails and teal eyeshadow don't make you a woman. XX chromosomes do. I don't write the rules. Talking about entitled and narcissistic, check out this British lady having an almighty meltdown because a polite driver called her Miss. You see, she doesn't identify as Miss.
I'm telling you, it's a frigging problem.
And I'm saying to you, thank you, miss. And then all of a sudden you start to be angry.
Why would you say thank you, miss? I don't...
Because I'm trying to be polite.
But how do you know I identify as a miss? I might be a miss.
Identify?
I might be something else.
I don't know. I'm not asking for identification ID. I'm just saying thank you,
Well,
miss.
I think it was disrespectful.
How is it disrespectful?
Because you don't know me. I've literally just got in your cab.
Yeah, and you said nice
I've been
car,
in
and
the
then I say
car
thank you, miss.
5 minutes.
Okay.
And you call me miss when it's not your place, is it? You're not family. You're not a friend.
But I'm trying to be polite, saying thank you, miss.
Well, I don't think that's polite. I think that's disrespectful.
Disrespectful to what?
To me.
How is it disrespectful for you?
How do you know I identify as anything?
What do you mean, identify?
You know, like gender.
Gender?
Yeah.
What do you mean by gender?
I might be a they.
They? You know, you're that. You're a woman. You're a woman over here. I can see you're my eyes.
Right, okay.
Okay.
So that makes it okay.
Okay for what? You give me complimenting,
So
and then I give you thanking.
If I would say to you, thank you, mister, do you think that's all right?
Of
don't
course.
think that sounds disrespectful?
Usually people in England using English, they say sir. So maybe you say sir. I don't know. Mister is okay. But maybe you don't have educations, or maybe you only say mister.
So
I don't know.
Okay.
That poor dude isn't paid enough to put up with that craziness. It's so crazy that I'm suspecting it's some sort of a setup, but these people do actually exist. Now, crazy Charlie Kirk credit here. Not only does he go to college campuses and seeks to have dialogue with lefties, but he manages to keep his cool and his manners, even when the lefties are as obnoxious and odious as this next dude who asks him what drug he's going to overdose on if Trump loses.
When Kamala wins and when you go into manic spirals, everything you've worked for crumbles around you, what illicit drugs are you going to overdose on?
So if Trump wins, what are you going to do to yourself?
I don't know, probably move to the Netherlands. I don't want to deal with them. Can you answer the question, though? Snowflake?
I hope that
Answer the question, Snowflake.
I hope Trump wins. Kamala might win.
Answer the question,
Let me tell you what happens.
Coward.
So let me tell you what happens. If Kamala Harris wins, which she might, unlike you, I will not flee my country. I will go back to work the next day if Kamala Harris wins. And you might be right. Kamala might win. It might be too much. But I'll be able to look my daughter and my son in the eye and say I did everything I possibly could to make sure that this country remained free and prosperous for you guys and that I gave it all on the line. But
Good luck with that, buddy. Come on, a sweep. Come on, a sweep.
See, this is what happens when you don't discipline your children. Imagine hiring that dude one day. Now to a young woman who doesn't need a job. She didn't even need school. She was too busy gallivanting around the world, telling presidents and prime ministers how to run their countries. And now Greta Thunberg is here to tell us why her anti-Israel crusade is linked to climate change.
In Palestine and all over the world, the fight against colonialism and corporations' destruction of the planet are intrinsically linked. Look at Chevron. Everyone knows that Chevron is one of the world's biggest climate criminals. But the oil giant is also fueling Israel's genocide in Palestine. As Israel bombs hospitals, homes, and schools in Gaza, Chevron supplies them with energy from 2 Israeli-claimed gas fields in the Mediterranean, making millions in the process. Ending Israel's genocide in Gaza and Israeli apartheid is a climate justice issue. Israel is destroying Palestinian lives, but also destroying Palestinian lands and resources through its warfare and industries that pollute and destroy the environment. We cannot stand by and do nothing.
Oh dear, just like her catastrophist global warming nonsense, just about every word she utters there is devoid of sense, facts. But remember, that didn't stop several world leaders from allowing that simpleton's activism and the climate cult to damage their energy security and with it, their economies and the prosperity of their people. And far from destroying the natural environment, Israel plants millions of trees every year. In fact, in 1948, they only had around 2% of the country covered in trees. Now that figure is around 8.5%. You'd think Greta and the Greenies would be happy about that. Now to a young lady who needs Jesus. Like, seriously.
I love killing babies. I love
Jesus will come. We have to give her the word.
I've had like 45 abortions and I'm going to keep having them.
To Fox News now, and watch here as a lefty Patrick Murphy is trying to push Biden's inflation lies. But there's a fact check coming from host Harris Faulkner, and it's beautiful.
So wait a minute. What did you say inflation was when Biden took over?
I said inflation was up at high at 9%. It's now down to 3.2%.
No. When he took over from Trump, it was 1.4%.
Yeah, and there was also there was also
I want to make sure, because
Biden
says it was at 9%, and I don't want you to get confused with his
debunked.
His false talking points.
Time to check in with the Veep and her many accents. This is urban Kamala from the block.
Brother, we are not going back. We are not going back. We are not going back. We will not go back.
This next one, I detect a Hispanic tone.
In fact, recently I was in Nevada. I'm in these streets, let me tell you, I'm everywhere. I love you back.
And let's take a trip down memory lane and have a look at the man who gave Kamala her big break, Willie Brown, who was 60 and the powerful Speaker of the California Assembly when he had a romantic relationship with 29-year-old Kamala and appointed her to 2 well-paid state board positions. And the rest, as they say, is history.
He's a rogue, all right, notorious for his flamboyant lifestyle. Flashy clothes, fancy parties, fine women, and fast cars.
You should from now on address me as the mayor.
If ever a man and a municipality were made for each other, it is this man, this place.
And this next young lady still hasn't forgiven Kamala for that Willie Brown dalliance.
The left is trying to tout this woman as a savior for the black community, but all she's done is hurt the black community since she came into the game. See, the first step in destroying the black community is to dismantle the black family. So aside from her record as a prosecutor, why don't we ask Mrs. Willie Brown if Kamala Harris cares about black families?
Hundreds of tons of ripe tomatoes going to waste. Perfection Fresh in the Adelaide Plains is one of 3 businesses that's detected tomato brown rugose fruit virus, which arrived in Australia for the first time last month. The SA government's decision to stop tomatoes from being sold from the properties has led the company to let go of hundreds of staff.
A significant cohort of those workers are PALMS workers, that is Pacific Islander workers who come here to undertake the work, along with employees from other migrant communities.
The virus can affect tomatoes' appearance, but it's otherwise safe to eat. The real threat is to the plants themselves, with the potential to reduce marketable yields by up to 75%.
Where we have the option to be able to curtail that impact, the state government has an obligation to do so.
WA and Queensland have banned SA tomatoes, and New South Wales is only taking fruit from properties in the clear.
Nationally, a number of scientific experts have come together
together to decide how do we contain this disease, and they've all agreed that fruit is a pathway for spread.
Tony Sacker is waiting on test results at his farm in Virginia, north of Adelaide. While the government says tomato prices are unlikely to be affected, Mr Sacker is concerned sustained restrictions could cause flow-on effects at the checkout.
Interstate, where they've lock the borders, they're not going to have availability to tomatoes or a very limited supply, and they could be up to $50, $60 a kilo.
Biosecurity authorities have taken thousands of samples from 18 sites in the hope of stamping out the virus before it takes hold in Australia.
At the moment, the evidence is only showing detections in 3 businesses. So on that basis, eradication is entirely possible.
An employee assistance hub will open in Virginia tomorrow to help Perfection Fresh's now former staff. Perfection Fresh says it's working with the state government, unions and other fruit and vegetable producers to try to find jobs for the staff who've been stood down. It says it hopes to rehire as many people as possible when tomato production resumes. Imogen Hain.
The first man's name was Kiki. He wore such little pants. His brother was the champion, but Kiki loved to dance. The second man was Choo Choo, a master of romance. He loved the damsel in distress, but not as much as dance. And then one day it happened. They went off to the world. They went on to a journey, idolized by the boys and girls. They learned so many lessons in all the foreign lands. But no matter where they wound up, they never stopped the dance. One day inside the station, in Amsterdam perchance, the men were dancing side by the man with the crooked glance. They turned to face each other. It was just happenstance that these 2 men would meet that day and do that fateful dance. Wow, you can really dance. Wow, you can really dance. He went. They said we've both been dancing all this time. What a coincidence. And then they danced together like no one's danced before. The diplomats were dancing, they cancelled all of the war. No more. The whole world celebrated with no more violence. And all because these men crossed paths. What a coincidence! Dance, 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 dance. Let's dance.
Do you genuinely think you are the best female breaker in Australia?
Well, I think my record speaks to that.
Is there any merit in those criticisms?
It is really sad to hear those criticisms, and I am very sorry for the backlash that the community has experienced, but I can't control how people react.
Australian journalists running after you while you're walking down the street, chasing you, asking you these questions. It must have been unlike anything you've ever experienced before. What was that moment like?
That was really wild. These people are chasing me. What do I do? But that really did put me in a state of panic.
Your option to buy an affordable Chinese-made electric vehicle is tonight under threat amid increasing calls for all Chinese cars to be banned on national security grounds. The United States says it will enforce a ban on Chinese EVs within months. The pressure is now on for Australia to follow suit. Here's our National Affairs editor, Hugh Riminton.
It's the stuff of movie nightmares. Electric cars going haywire in a time of conflict. It's not crazy, says Australia's former cybersecurity chief, but the real risk comes from China.
They are full of cameras and they are full of microphones. They are a software-driven device that just happens to have wheels.
US President Joe Biden is racing through new laws before he leaves office, banning on national security grounds all Chinese-made vehicles that connect to the internet. That includes all EVs.
We have sleptwalked into this as the West by thinking that there is no distinction between made in China and controlled by China.
Australia's Home Affairs Department says it is closely monitoring the US developments.
The future is here right now.
China is now the third largest producer of vehicles on Australian roads, and EVs are central to the Albanese government's emissions reductions targets. That strategy is to build up demand for electric vehicles by increasing the supply of affordable models, and that plan rests almost entirely on Chinese imports.
The fact is that in a decade's time, you'll struggle to walk into a car yard like this and find something that's not an EV.
Intriguingly, China has banned Teslas operating near its sensitive sites. But the opposition is hesitant to pull the plug.
Do you think Australia should ban Chinese vehicles?
We're always going to be reticent to do something in the midst of a cost of living crisis that raises the cost of living.
Hugh Rimmington for 10 News First.
We are less than 6 weeks away from Election Day in the United States, and we know it is a super tight race between...
Down with deportation! Up with education! Down with deportation! Up with education! Down with deportation!
And...
we are going to start the largest mass deportation in the history of our country because we have no choice. It's not sustainable. And we are going to start with violent criminals, and we're going to start then with criminals.
According to the latest poll from NBC National News, Kamala Harris is leading Donald Trump 49% to 44%. And NBC News wrote about Kamala Harris's impressive transformation because she's somehow managed to jump 16 percentage points since July. NBC News says that it's the largest increase for any politician in NBC News polling since then President George W. Bush's standing surged after the 9/11 terrorist attacks. So, how did Kamala Harris go from someone who was widely perceived as an average vice president to the likely next commander-in-chief in just a matter of months? It might have something to do with the left-wing media running a pro-Kamala Harris campaign.
Kamala Harris!
Yeah. But in our country, we need you to be Mamala of the country.
No, I'm not.
Kamala
I just said I'm not going to vote for her.
Is not running for perfect. She's running against Trump. We have two choices. And so there are some things you might not know her answer to. And in 2024, unlike 2016 for a lot of the American people, we know exactly what Trump will do, who he is, and the kind of threat he is to democracy.
I don't know.
It's been 65 days since Kamala Harris became the presumptive and now official Democratic nominee for president, and she has managed to go that entire time without holding an official press conference. That is unbelievable. Thinking about how federal elections and campaigns are run right here in Australia, this type of hiding from the media would never be accepted here. The very basic expectation is for both major party leaders to be holding press conferences nearly every day, which is live streamed right here on Sky News. And senior reporters are on the ground putting tough questions to our leaders and keeping that pressure well and truly on every day until Australians head to the polls. But Kamala Harris is showing the American people that she does not care about transparency. And ultimately, she doesn't really want you to get to know her. She'd rather run on a campaign where she can avoid hard-hitting interviews and watch her popularity rise thanks to the left-wing media, celebrity endorsements, and being boosted by a campaign that is just heavy on vibes and light on policy detail. Kamala Harris is set to finally reveal the details around her plan for what she says is an opportunity economy, but Donald Trump is warning Americans not to fall for it.
Kamala Harris is reportedly given a speech in Pittsburgh. You know, her speeches are very short. About her plan to, quote, build wealth. She doesn't know anything about building wealth. But she's been in office for 3.5 years. She's saying what she's going to do if she becomes president. But she's been there almost 4 years. She hasn't done anything except destroy our country.
Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer joined Sky News and claims that Kamala Harris is getting an unprecedented free pass with the media on her side. And that's been evident in the way she snubbed a top Catholic fundraiser, the Al Smith Dinner.
But it is unconventional and untraditional. And because she has the media on her side, Andrew, she gets away with stuff like this. I mean, the reality is that this dinner may not seem like a big deal to a lot of people outside the political beltway, but it was a time-honored tradition in America where people put aside their differences to come together one night and have sort of good humor and a fun time, showing the American people that despite differences, they could actually sit at the same dais and have an enjoyable evening. And for her to just so glibly say, I'm not going to be here because I'm going to be off campaigning, it's not even like she had an event and said, oh, I'm double booked that night. She just literally said, I'll be off campaigning. It's a big snub to tradition. It's a big snub to Catholics. By the way, it is a charity fundraiser for Catholic charity. So it's a big deal for the people who benefit from that. And it's unfortunate. But sadly, Andrew, over and over again, we've seen since she entered the race that she gets a pass that no other candidate in history has ever had before, and I don't think we'll have again.
Yeah, Sean, but you know what the problem is with these things? They are very exposing. You've got to be funny, you've got to be charming, you've got to show a little self-deprecation, wit, and all those things I think are, well, she can't deliver, and it's a high-risk thing for her to go to. I think that is the bottom line here.
And you just put your finger on it. For all these people who think she should be out there doing more interviews, doing more speeches, doing things that show a certain side to her that they want to see, her staff knows she's incapable of doing it. That's the dirty secret. It was the same thing with Biden, but for different reasons. When people kept saying he should be out there more, he should do town halls, he should do this. It wasn't that the staff didn't know it. They just knew his limitations. And for different reasons, the staff surrounding Kamala Harris knows the same thing. She's incapable of being unscripted.
Now, Sean, I've noted the astonishing result in the Teamster Union poll of members, the drift of some of the recent opinion polls now, particularly in the swing states, the signs of panic, like saying no to this dinner, for instance. How is her campaign going?
You know, it's an interesting question that you're asking because the national media in the United States loves to throw out these shiny nickels and say, look at this national poll. She's up by 4 points. Well, that's great, except we don't vote nationally. We vote by state. And right now, when you look at the path to 270 electoral votes, which is what you need to win, I did this on my podcast the other day. Donald Trump's got several paths to victory, several ways to get 270 votes. She doesn't. In fact, if she doesn't win the entirety of what we call the blue wall, that's Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, she loses. Donald Trump just needs to pick off one state. When you look at the state polls that just came up, Trump is up 4 or 5 points in Arizona. He's up 4 or 5 points in Georgia. He's up a couple points in North Carolina. He's doing what he needs to do. It's Kamala Harris that's on the defense when it comes to a path to 270 electoral votes. But the national media doesn't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about the erosion in some of these other key demographics. For example, the Hispanic vote, she's up like 20 points. That's great on its face, except for traditionally, that's about a 30-point gap between the Republican and the Democrat. Donald Trump has closed it. So the national media is trying to create the perception through national polls and other things that don't matter that she's actually doing really well and trending in the right direction. But when you scratch beneath the surface and look at what actually will make a deciding factor as to who will be the next president of the United States, who will get those 270 electoral votes, it favors Donald Trump.
You know, at the Oprah Love-In, and I showed some of it last night, Sean, Harris was asked by members of the audience what concrete things would she do to stop illegal immigration? What concrete things she would do to cut the cost of living? In those questions, she didn't have any practical policy to put. I mean, she just had motherhood statements. It was so embarrassing. What policies has she put out in this campaign?
Well, very few, but let's go back to the example that you just highlighted. And I'm so glad that you did, because I've been doing this for 30 years, right? This is the number one issue that voters in America care about, not just the economy, but the cost of things, the cost of goods and services, of food. If you're her staff, if you're Kamala Harris, do you know you're getting that question? That's number one every day of the week. And yet here she was again on that Oprah interview, flat-footed. And I'm thinking to myself, this was the gimme. You knew this was coming, and all you needed to do was throw out, 4 or 5 ridiculous policies to get through it, and everybody would have said, well, I don't agree with it, but at least I give her credit for it. She couldn't even do that. She just talks about, I sympathize with you and the middle class this, and that's not a policy.
And I think really there you've put your finger on something that I haven't mentioned about the shift away from her. I think there is that growing realisation that it's all fluff, all bubble, and nothing of substance behind it. And that's coming out. The more she speaks, the more obvious that's become. Sean Spicer, thank you so much for your time.